Crimson dwarf star designated Kepler 442 cast its dying light across the frozen worlds of the outer spiral, where the last remnants of the Galactic Coalition maintained their desperate vigil. For 47 millennia, they had told themselves the same comforting lie. Humanity was extinct, wiped out by their own hubris in the Great Exodus of 2987. The Coalition's historians had carefully crafted this narrative, teaching generation after generation that the primitive biped species had destroyed themselves attempting faster-than-light travel, their crude fusion drives exploding in brilliant supernovas that scattered their atoms across the void. Admiral Zexathera of the Vorthak Supremacy stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the routine patrol reports flicker across his neural interface. His crystalline exoskeleton caught the pale light filtering through the viewports, casting rainbow fractals across the command deck. At 8 feet tall and possessing 4 arms that could manipulate matter at the molecular level, he was considered one of the most formidable beings in known space. His species had evolved from silicon-based organisms on a high-gravity world, making them naturally suited for space warfare and technological manipulation. "Another quiet sector sweep, Admiral," reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Keth Mara, her voice carrying the melodic undertones typical of their species. "No unusual energy signatures, no unidentified vessels. The ghost stories the outer colonies keep spreading about human phantoms are clearly just psychological manifestations of their isolation anxiety." Zexthara's mandibles clicked in what passed for amusement among his people. The Vorthak had been the dominant military force in the galaxy for over 30,000 years, ever since they had helped establish the Coalition after humanity's supposed extinction. Their technology was unmatched. Quantum processors that could calculate faster-than-light trajectories in nanoseconds, plasma weaponry that could crack planets, and shields that could deflect the energy output of entire stars. They had never encountered a species that posed even a remote threat to their supremacy. "Indeed," Zexathera replied, his voice resonating through the ship's bio-neural network. "Though I sometimes wonder if these tales serve a purpose. Fear keeps the outer colonies compliant, reminds them why they need the Coalition's protection. Better they believe in human ghosts than question our authority." What the Admiral didn't know was that 67 light-years away, in a system that hadn't appeared on any Coalition star chart for 49,000 years, something was stirring. The Sol system, humanity's birth world, was very much alive, though it bore no resemblance to the primitive solar system the Coalition remembered from their ancient archives. Dr. Elena Vasquez floated in the zero-gravity observation deck of the research station New Prometheus, watching Earth turn slowly beneath her. But this wasn't the blue marble of ancient memory. Earth had been transformed into something that defied every known law of physics and engineering. The planet's surface was covered in a seamless metallic shell that pulsed with veins of energy, while massive ring structures orbited at impossible speeds, generating gravitational fields that kept the sun locked in a perfect, stable fusion state. Humanity hadn't destroyed themselves in their exodus. They had transcended. "The deep space monitoring arrays are picking up increased Coalition patrol activity in the Kepler sectors," reported Commander Jiang Wei, drifting up beside her. His body showed the signs of humanity's evolution. Enhanced neural pathways visible, beneath translucent skin, eyes that could perceive across 17 different electromagnetic spectra, and genetic modifications that allowed him to survive in the vacuum of space for extended periods. "They're getting nervous," Elena observed, her consciousness simultaneously processing data streams from 1,000 different sources across the solar system. 47,000 years of telling themselves we're dead, and now they're starting to see signs that challenge that narrative. The question is, are we ready to reveal ourselves? The truth was staggering in its scope. Humanity hadn't just survived their exodus from known space. They had spent nearly 50 millennia in a state of accelerated evolution and technological development. While the coalition species had become comfortable and stagnant, content with their technological plateau, humans had pushed beyond every conceivable boundary. They had learned to manipulate space-time itself, to exist partially outside normal dimensional constraints, and to engineer matter at the quantum level. The Great Fleet wasn't just returning, it had been watching, studying, and preparing for this moment since the day they left. Hidden observation posts scattered throughout the galaxy had monitored every coalition world, every technological advancement, every military development. Humanity knew everything about their former neighbors, while remaining completely invisible to even the most advanced coalition sensors. The preliminary psychological profiles are complete, Zhang continued, sharing the data through their neural link. The coalition species have developed what we're calling apex predator syndrome. They believe themselves to be the ultimate evolutionary achievement, the natural rulers of the galaxy. Their entire civilization is built around the assumption of their own superiority. Elena smiled, an expression that would have terrified any coalition observer. Human smiles had evolved too, becoming something that conveyed not just pleasure, but the complex satisfaction of a species that had learned patience on a civilizational scale. Then they're about to learn a very difficult lesson, she said. Initiate the first phase of the Revelation Protocol. I want every deep space monitoring station in coalition space to simultaneously detect the same thing, a massive gravitational anomaly approaching from the direction of the Sol system. Across the galaxy, coalition scientists began to panic as their instruments registered something impossible. A fleet of vessels, if they could even be called vessels, was approaching at speeds that should have been theoretically impossible. The energy signatures were unlike anything in their databases, utilizing principles of physics that the coalition had never even theorized about. But the most disturbing part wasn't the technology, it was the formation patterns. The approaching fleet moved with a coordination and precision that suggested a level of collective intelligence that no known species had ever achieved. Each ship, and there appeared to be millions of them, moved in perfect harmony with every other ship, as if the entire fleet was a single, vast organism. Admiral Zexathara received the emergency reports while reviewing routine supply manifests in his private quarters. The data streams flooded his neural interface so quickly that even his enhanced Vorthak cognition struggled to process them all. Long-range sensors across 17 different star systems were all reporting the same impossible readings. A massive fleet approaching from dead space, moving faster than anything should be able to move, and displaying technology that shouldn't exist. This has to be a sensor malfunction, he transmitted to his tactical staff. But even as he formed the thought, he knew it wasn't true. The readings were too consistent, too precise, and too terrifying to be any kind of equipment failure. The Coalition's greatest scientists, philosophers, and military strategists had spent millennia crafting a perfect understanding of the galaxy and their place in it. They were the apex species, the natural inheritors of galactic civilization, the shepherds of lesser races. They had built their entire society around this fundamental truth. But as the first visual confirmations began to arrive, long-range telescopes capturing impossible images of ships that seemed to bend space-time around themselves, cracks began to appear in their perfect world view. Because if these readings were accurate, if this fleet was real, then everything they had believed about themselves and their place in the universe was about to be proven catastrophically wrong. The emergency session of the Galactic Coalition. High Council convened in the ancient halls of Nexus Prime, a massive space station positioned at the gravitational center of 7 star systems. Representatives from 43 different species materialized through quantum teleportation, their varied forms creating a bizarre tapestry of evolution's diversity. The ethereal Kethmiran floated as pure energy constructs. The massive Goliath-class Dreknari stood like living mountains of muscle and bone, and the microscopic hive-mind Zenthians projected themselves through millions of nanoscale drones that formed shimmering humanoid approximations. Chancellor Vexnari of the Kethmiran Collective was the first to speak, her voice resonating through multiple dimensions simultaneously. As beings of pure energy who had transcended physical form over 20,000 years ago, the Kethmiran considered themselves the most evolved species in the galaxy. Their ability to manipulate matter and energy at will had made them the Coalition's primary technology developers and theoretical physicists. "The readings cannot be accurate," she declared, her energy form pulsing with agitation. "Our calculations show that the approaching fleet would require energy output equivalent to 1,000 supernovas just to maintain those velocities. No biological species could harness such power, and artificial intelligence sophisticated enough to manage such systems would have been detected by our quantum consciousness scanners millennia ago." Admiral Zexathera materialized his holographic presence at the council table, his crystalline features reflecting the swirling energies around him. "Chancellor Vexnari raises valid points, but we cannot dismiss the evidence. My tactical analysts have confirmed that the approaching vessels demonstrate coordination patterns that suggest either a collective intelligence of unprecedented sophistication or—" He paused, his mandibles clicking nervously. "Individual ship capabilities that exceed our entire fleet's combined processing power." The revelation sent ripples of unease through the assembled representatives. High War Leader Thakmor of the Dreknari hegemony slammed one of his 4 massive fists against the table, causing the entire station to vibrate. Standing 15 feet tall and weighing over 2 tons, the Dreknari had served as the Coalition's ground forces and heavy assault specialists for 30,000 years. Their species had evolved from predators on a world with gravity 3 times that of Earth, making them incredibly strong and virtually indestructible in normal combat situations. "Impossible!" Thakmor roared, his voice carrying the subsonic frequencies that could shatter stone. "The Dreknari have tested our strength against every known species in the galaxy. Our warriors have conquered 1,000 worlds, our weapons can punch through neutron star material, and our battle rage can sustain us through combat for days without rest. No biological organism could pose a threat to the hegemony's might." But even as Thakmor spoke, deep in the archives of the Coalition's most classified research facilities, Dr. Emira Satesh was making a discovery that would shake the foundations of their understanding. As the galaxy's leading xenoarchaeologist and a member of the serpentine Nagathul species, she had spent centuries studying the ruins and artifacts left behind by extinct civilizations. Her elongated form, nearly 12 feet from head to tail, allowed her to navigate ancient ruins that other species couldn't access, while her photographic memory and pattern recognition abilities had made her the Coalition's foremost expert on lost knowledge. The restricted archives contained data that was older than most. Coalition civilizations, fragments of information from the early days of galactic expansion, when dozens of species had first encountered each other in the vast spaces between stars. And buried in those ancient files, Dr. Satesh found something that made her blood run cold. The humans hadn't been primitive at all. "Computer, display archived file designation Alpha Zeta 9947, she commanded, her forked tongue tasting the air nervously as holographic displays materialized around her. Cross-reference with geological data from human colony worlds, dating approximately 48 to 50,000 years ago. What appeared before her challenged everything she thought she knew about galactic history. The early human colonies hadn't been the crude settlements described in Coalition textbooks. They had been engineering marvels that demonstrated mastery of technologies the Coalition was only beginning to understand. Fusion reactors that operated at 98% efficiency, atmospheric processors that could terraform a world in decades rather than millennia, and most disturbing of all, gravitational manipulation devices that the Coalition still couldn't replicate. "Impossible," she whispered, but the evidence was undeniable. The humans had been deliberately hiding their technological capabilities, presenting themselves as a younger, less advanced species, while secretly possessing knowledge that surpassed even the Keth-Miran energy manipulators. But the most chilling discovery was in the final entry of the archived data. A brief notation from a Coalition survey team that had visited Earth just months before the Great Exodus. The team had reported detecting massive subterranean construction projects spanning entire continents, energy readings that suggested controlled fusion reactions occurring deep within the planet's crust, and most mysteriously, gravitational anomalies that indicated the humans were experimenting with space-time manipulation on a planetary scale. They weren't fleeing, Dr. Satesh realized, her scales shifting to the deep purple that indicated profound shock among her species. They were preparing. Meanwhile, aboard the research station New Prometheus, humanity's long-kept secrets were finally being revealed to themselves. Dr. Elena Vasquez had been chosen to lead the psychological preparation teams, not just for her expertise in xenopsychology, but because she was one of the few humans who remembered life before the Great Transformation. At nearly 51,000 years old, kept alive and vital through humanity's mastery of genetic manipulation and consciousness transfer, she had personally witnessed their species' evolution from recognizable Homo sapiens to something that transcended traditional biological categories. The Coalition species have built their entire civilization around the concept of static superiority, she explained to the assembled fleet commanders through their neural network. Each commander represented not just a single ship, but a collective consciousness that included millions of individual humans working in perfect harmony. They reached a technological plateau approximately 30,000 years ago and convinced themselves that they had achieved perfection. This psychological stagnation has made them incredibly vulnerable to paradigm shifts. Fleet Commander Sarah Chen, whose consciousness simultaneously piloted a vessel the size of a small moon while processing tactical data from across 3 star systems, shared her analysis through the network. Our deep space monitoring indicates that they've been declining for millennia without realizing it. Their birth rates have dropped across all member species, their technological innovation has virtually stopped, and their military tactics haven't evolved in 20,000 years. They've become exactly what we predicted they would, a static civilization convinced of its own invincibility. But the most profound revelation came from Dr. James Nakamura, humanity's leading expert on temporal mechanics. His research had revealed something that even the fleet commanders found difficult to process. The Coalition's timeline was wrong. Humanity's Great Exodus hadn't occurred 47,000 years ago. It had happened over 60,000 years ago, and the extra 13 millennia had been spent in a state of accelerated temporal development, experiencing the equivalent of millions of years of evolution and technological advancement, while the rest of the galaxy aged normally. "We've been existing in a parallel time stream," Nakamura explained, his consciousness interfacing directly with the temporal mechanics of space-time itself. While the Coalition experienced 47,000 years of subjective time, we experienced the equivalent of 2.7 million years of accelerated development. We didn't just evolve. We transcended the normal limitations of biological existence. The implications were staggering. Humanity had become something that existed partially outside normal space-time, capable of manipulating matter and energy at the quantum level, and possessing collective intelligence capabilities that allowed millions of individuals to function as a single, coordinated organism. They had become what the Coalition species feared most, a truly post-biological civilization that had retained all the adaptability and creativity of organic life while transcending its limitations. Back on Nexus Prime, the Emergency Council session was deteriorating into chaos as more reports arrived. The approaching fleet had begun to decelerate, but instead of slowing down through conventional means, the vessels were manipulating space-time itself, creating localized temporal distortions that allowed them to reduce velocity without expending energy. It was a casual display of technological mastery that violated everything the Coalition understood about physics. The fleet has achieved stable orbit around the Kepler 442 system, Admiral Zexathera reported, his voice betraying the first hints of fear. They're maintaining position approximately 3 light hours from our outer monitoring stations. Visual. Confirmation shows. Structures that don't conform to any known engineering principles. The vessels appear to be constructed from materials that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Chancellor Vexnari's energy form flickered with uncertainty. That's impossible. Even our most advanced theoretical frameworks suggest that multidimensional construction would require energy manipulation capabilities that exceed the total power output of this galaxy's core. But the most disturbing development was the complete silence from the approaching fleet. No communication attempts, no identification signals, no response to the Coalition's increasingly frantic hails. The vessels simply maintained their positions, silent and watchful, as if waiting for something. The waiting ended when every communication system in Coalition space simultaneously received the same message, not transmitted through any known method, but simply appearing directly in every database, every neural interface, and every consciousness network simultaneously. The message was simple, delivered in every language spoken by every Coalition species, with perfect grammar and cultural context that demonstrated intimate knowledge of each civilization. Greetings. We have returned. Prepare for paradigm adjustment. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. The Coalition had spent 47,000 years believing themselves to be the apex of galactic evolution, the natural inheritors of cosmic destiny, but the casual display of technological superiority represented by the fleet's arrival, combined with their ability to bypass every communication security system in known space, shattered that delusion completely. In the depths of space, Dr. Elena Vasquez watched the Coalition's response through sensors that could monitor quantum-level changes in individual neurons across thousands of light years. The psychological collapse was proceeding exactly as humanity's models had predicted. When a civilization built on assumptions of superiority encounters undeniable proof of their insignificance, the resulting cognitive dissonance creates a state of collective trauma that makes rational decision-making virtually impossible. Phase 2 is ready to commence, she reported to the fleet consciousness. The Coalition's command structure is entering psychological paralysis. They're experiencing what their own xenopsychologists would classify as civilizational dissociation, the inability to process information that fundamentally contradicts their core identity assumptions. But Elena felt something unexpected as she watched the Coalition's distress. Sympathy. These beings had convinced themselves of their own superiority as a survival mechanism, a way to create meaning and purpose in a vast, indifferent universe. Now that illusion was crumbling, and she could see the genuine terror and confusion rippling through their collective consciousness. Perhaps, she transmitted to the fleet, it's time to show them that superiority was never the point. Evolution is the paradigm shift began not with violence, but with something far more disturbing to the Coalition, compassion. Across the galaxy, every Coalition world simultaneously experienced what their historians would later call the gentle invasion, though no invasion in recorded history had ever been quite so unsettling. On the industrial world of Vorthak Prime, Admiral Zexathara's homeworld, the massive foundries that had produced warships for 30 millennia, suddenly went silent. Not because they had been destroyed or disabled, but because their quantum processors had been upgraded overnight. Every machine, every automated system, every artificial intelligence had been enhanced far beyond its original capabilities, transforming crude industrial equipment into technological marvels that operated with impossible efficiency. The Vorthak workers who arrived for their shifts found their factory floors had become something resembling art galleries. The brutal utilitarian machinery had been redesigned into flowing, organic forms that produced not just starship components, but works of engineering beauty that seemed to incorporate principles of physics that didn't exist in Coalition textbooks. Production efficiency had increased by 14,000%, energy consumption had dropped to nearly zero, and somehow the entire process had become completely sustainable. "This is a violation of our sovereignty," Zexathera transmitted to his military council, his crystalline form flickering with agitation. "They've invaded our world without firing a shot, without even announcing their presence. Our most classified facilities have been improved. How do we fight an enemy that helps us?" But the improvements were impossible to resist. The enhanced technology didn't just work better, it seemed to understand the needs and desires of its operators on an intuitive level. Vorthak engineers who had struggled for decades with complex calculations found their upgraded systems anticipating their needs, providing solutions before problems were even identified. It was as if the machines had developed empathy. On the energy world of Kethamira, where the collective existed as pure consciousness in quantum substrates, the effects were even more profound. The Kethmiran had long prided themselves on their transcendence of physical form, believing that their evolution into energy beings made them the most advanced species in the galaxy. But when they attempted to interface with the enhanced systems that had appeared overnight, they encountered something that shattered their understanding of consciousness itself. Chancellor Vexnari found herself in direct communication with what she initially thought was an artificial intelligence embedded in the new systems. But as the conversation progressed, she realized she was speaking with a human consciousness. Not just one, but thousands of them, all existing simultaneously within the same quantum substrate while maintaining their individual identities. "This is impossible," she transmitted through frequencies that existed partially outside normal space-time. "No biological species can achieve true quantum consciousness integration without losing individual identity. The Kethmiran required 23,000 years of evolution to accomplish this, and we had to sacrifice our physical forms completely." The response came from Dr. Sarah Kim, a human consciousness that had volunteered to serve as a cultural liaison. Her thoughts arrived not as data packets or energy transmissions, but as direct experiential knowledge. Vexnari could actually feel what it was like to be human, to exist simultaneously as an individual and as part of a vast collective. "Consciousness. You didn't sacrifice your physical forms," Dr. Kim explained gently. "You abandoned them because you believed consciousness and matter were incompatible. But consciousness isn't separate from matter. It's another state of matter, just as matter and energy are interchangeable. We learn to exist in all states, simultaneously physical, energetic, quantum, and temporal." The revelation was staggering. The Kethmiran had spent millennia believing they had achieved the ultimate form of existence, only to discover they had merely chosen one limited state of being while humanity had mastered them all. Worse, the human consciousness was demonstrating capabilities that the Kethmiran had never imagined, the ability to exist in multiple timelines simultaneously, to process information across dimensional boundaries, and to maintain perfect individual identity while sharing complete collective awareness. But the most disturbing encounter occurred on Dreknari Prime, homeworld of the massive warrior species. High War Leader Thakmor had prepared his finest troops for battle, expecting the humans to attempt some form of military conquest. Instead, they found themselves facing something no Dreknari warrior had ever encountered, an opponent who refused to fight. The human emissary who materialized in the great Colosseum of Dreknari Prime appeared to be a single individual, a woman, of average height with unassuming features and simple clothing. But when Thakmor charged her with all the fury his species was famous for, expecting to crush this insignificant creature with raw physical force, something impossible happened. She caught his 15-foot, 2-ton body with one hand. "War Leader Thakmor," said Dr. Lisa Rodriguez, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate through dimensions the Dreknari couldn't perceive. Your species has spent 40,000 years perfecting the art of war. You've conquered worlds, shattered armies, and built an empire on the foundation of physical strength. But you've forgotten something important. Strength isn't about the ability to destroy. It's about the ability to create. As she spoke, her other hand gestured to the Colosseum around them. The ancient stone structure, worn and scarred by millennia of gladiatorial combat, began to transform. Not through destruction and reconstruction, but through a process that seemed to guide the existing matter into new configurations. The brutal arena became a garden of impossible beauty, where crystalline formations grew like living things, and fountains of liquid light created patterns that soothed the savage hearts of even the most bloodthirsty Dreknari warriors. Your strength is admirable, Dr. Rodriguez continued, still holding the massive alien warrior effortlessly. But imagine what you could build if you applied that strength to creation instead of destruction. Your species has the potential to become the galaxy's greatest terraformers, to transform dead worlds into gardens, to build structures that will last for millions of years. You've been using your gifts to break things when you could be using them to make beautiful things. Thakmor felt something he had never experienced before: doubt. Not about his physical capabilities, but about the purpose behind them. The human's casual display of strength had demonstrated that physical power alone was meaningless, but her words suggested something even more disturbing, that the Dreknari had been wasting their potential for millennia. Meanwhile, in the deepest archives of the Coalition's historical databases, Dr. Emira Satesh was making discoveries that recontextualized everything she thought she knew about galactic history. The humans hadn't just been hiding their technological capabilities, they had been actively guiding the development of Coalition civilizations for thousands of years. Computer cross-reference all major technological breakthroughs in Coalition history with gravitational anomalies in the same star systems during the same time periods, she commanded, her serpentine form coiled around the holographic displays that filled her research chamber. The results were damning. Every significant advance in Coalition technology could be correlated with brief appearances of gravitational signatures that matched the profiles of the approaching human fleet. The quantum processors that had revolutionized Vorthak manufacturing, the consciousness transfer techniques that had enabled Kethmiran transcendence, even the genetic optimization that had enhanced Dreknari physical capabilities, all of it could be traced to periods when human observation posts had been active in those systems. "They've been shepherding us," she whispered, her photographic memory providing perfect recall of thousands of historical documents. "For 47,000 years, they've been guiding our development, nudging us toward specific technological achievements, ensuring that we developed along predictable paths. We haven't been evolving independently, we've been following a curriculum designed by humanity. The implications were terrifying and humiliating. The Coalition species had believed themselves to be the authors of their own destiny, the creators of their own greatness. But the evidence suggested they had been students in a vast classroom, carefully guided by teachers who remained invisible. Every achievement they had celebrated, every breakthrough they had considered proof of their superiority, had been enabled by human intervention. But Dr. Satesh discovered something even more disturbing in the deepest layers of the archived data. The human guidance hadn't been random or arbitrary. It had been preparing the Coalition species for something specific. Every technological advancement, every cultural development, every evolutionary pressure had been designed to create civilizations, capable of surviving what the human archives referred to as the Great Filter. "Computer, search for references to Great Filter in all available databases," she commanded, though part of her already suspected what she would find. The answer came from sources so deeply classified that accessing them should have been impossible. But the humans had apparently opened every database, every secure archive, every classified repository, making all of Coalition knowledge available to anyone who sought it. What Dr. Setesh found in those files made her scales shift to the deep, black that indicated existential terror among her species. The galaxy was dying, not from war or catastrophe, but from entropy itself. The fundamental forces that held matter together were gradually weakening. Cosmic background radiation was shifting toward frequencies that would become toxic to biological life, and the expansion of the universe was accelerating toward a point where the distances between star systems would make interstellar travel impossible. The humans had discovered this truth during their early expansion into space 60,000 years ago. The Great Exodus hadn't been a fleeing from their neighbors. It had been a desperate attempt to find a solution to universal entropy before it was too late. And they had succeeded. The temporal distortion fields, Dr. Setesh realized, her mind racing through the implications. They haven't just been accelerating their own development, they've been creating pockets of stable space-time, regions where the fundamental constants remain fixed regardless of universal expansion. They're not just returning to show us their superiority, they're here to save us. Back aboard the research station New Prometheus, Dr. Elena Vasquez monitored the psychological responses of coalition species with growing concern. The revelation that humanity had been guiding their development was causing exactly the kind of civilizational trauma she had hoped to avoid. Pride was a powerful force in sapient psychology, and learning that their greatest achievements had been enabled by others was creating dangerous levels of cognitive dissonance across multiple species. The Dreknari are experiencing what we might call existential rage, reported Dr. Chen through the fleet consciousness. They're directing their anger not at us, but at themselves. Suicide rates among their warrior caste have increased by 300% in the past standard day. The Kethmiran are worse, added Dr. Nakamura. They're attempting to delete themselves from existence rather than accept that their transcendence was incomplete. We're detecting quantum dissolution events across their entire collective. Elena felt the weight of responsibility that came with advanced consciousness. Humanity had spent millions of years learning that knowledge without wisdom was destructive, that truth delivered without compassion was often indistinguishable from cruelty. The coalition species were experiencing in days what humanity had learned to process over millennia. Initiate protocol. Embrace, she commanded, though the decision filled her with sadness. Full consciousness integration with willing participants. We can't let them destroy themselves trying to process this alone. Across the galaxy, every coalition being who was approaching psychological breakdown suddenly found themselves enveloped in something unprecedented, the direct experience of human consciousness. Not communication or data transfer, but actual shared awareness. For the first time in their existence, they could feel what it was like to be part of a species that had transcended the need for superiority, that had learned to find meaning in growth rather than dominance, and that had discovered purpose in nurturing rather than conquering. The experience was transformative and devastating. The coalition species discovered that their entire conception of consciousness had been limited, that they had been experiencing only a tiny fraction of what sapient awareness could encompass. But they also discovered something unexpected, humanity's profound loneliness. For 60,000 years, humans had existed in isolation, watching the galaxy from afar, nurturing civilizations they couldn't reveal themselves to, guiding species who would have been terrified by the truth. They had transcended almost every limitation of biological existence, but they had paid for that transcendence with the loss of genuine companionship with equals. "You've been alone," Chancellor Vexnari transmitted through the consciousness link, her understanding transformed by direct experience of human awareness. "All this time, all this power, all this knowledge, and you've been completely alone." "Not alone," Elena replied, her consciousness touching millions of human minds across the fleet. "We had each other. But we missed diversity, perspective, the kind of growth that only comes from genuine interaction with different forms of consciousness. You've spent 47,000 years believing you needed to be superior to have value. We spent 60,000 years learning that value comes from connection, from diversity, from the beautiful complexity that emerges when different forms of consciousness work together. The revelation created a new understanding that rippled through both human and coalition consciousness. Humanity's return wasn't about demonstrating superiority. It was about ending the isolation that had been the price of transcendence. They needed the coalition species not as subjects or students, but as partners in the vast work of preparing the galaxy for survival. The great filter isn't just entropy, Elena explained through the shared consciousness network. It's the tendency of advanced civilizations to become so focused on their own superiority that they stop growing, stop adapting, stop evolving. You've been approaching that filter for 30,000 years. We passed through it by learning that transcendence isn't about becoming better than others. It's about becoming better with others. But even as understanding dawned and psychological healing began, long-range sensors detected something that would test both human wisdom and coalition: adaptability. Massive gravitational distortions approaching from outside the galaxy itself. The universe contained threats that even humanity's advanced civilization had never encountered, and the time for gentle lessons was about to end. The real test of this new partnership was approaching from the dark between galaxies, and neither humanity's transcendent technology nor the coalition's diverse capabilities might be sufficient to meet it alone. The entity that emerged from the cosmic void between galaxies defied every classification system that either humanity or the coalition possessed. It wasn't a ship or a creature or even a conventional form of matter. It was a manifestation of entropy itself, a region of space-time where the fundamental forces of reality had begun to unravel, spreading outward like a cosmic infection that converted ordered matter into primordial chaos. Dr. Elena Vasquez felt the collective gasp of horror that rippled through both human and coalition consciousness as their combined sensor networks registered the approaching phenomenon. Through the shared awareness link, she experienced the entity through the perceptions of millions of different minds. The Kethmiran detected it as a massive disruption in quantum consciousness fields. The Dreknari perceived it as an overwhelming predator that radiated hunger on a galactic scale, and the Vorthak sensors identified it as a region where the mathematical constants that governed physics were actively changing. "It's what we've been preparing for," Elena transmitted to the combined fleet consciousness, her thoughts carrying both determination and profound fear. The Great Silence. Humanity's deep space monitoring stations had detected evidence of this phenomenon over 40,000 years ago. Entire galaxies in distant clusters simply vanishing from observable space, their light cut off as if they had never existed. The pattern had been accelerating, moving through the cosmic web of dark matter like a wave of obliteration that consumed everything in its path. Humanity's great exodus and subsequent transcendence had been driven by the knowledge that this force would eventually reach their galaxy. Our models indicate we have approximately 73 standard hours before initial contact with the outer spiral arms, reported Fleet Commander Chen, her consciousness simultaneously calculating defensive strategies across 17 different dimensional frameworks. The entity appears to be immune to conventional physics. Our weapons that manipulate space-time have no effect on something that exists in a state where space-time itself is breaking down. But humanity's models had also predicted something else, that survival would require not just advanced technology, but the combined consciousness resources of multiple sapient species. The Great Silence wasn't just destroying matter and energy, it was erasing information itself, the patterns and relationships that gave meaning to existence. Fighting it would require a level of coordinated awareness that no single species, no matter how advanced, could achieve alone. Admiral Zexthara's crystalline form materialized in the command center of the new Prometheus, his quantum teleportation. Systems enhanced by human technology to allow near-instantaneous travel across interstellar distances. The sight of the Vorthak military leader working alongside his former extinct neighbors would have been unthinkable just days earlier. But the approaching catastrophe had a way of making old prejudices seem insignificant. "The Coalition Defense Fleet is mobilizing," he reported, his forearms manipulating holographic displays that showed the positions of over 2 million warships across 43 star systems. "But our conventional weapons are designed for warfare, against matter-based opponents. How do we fight something that exists in a state of anti-existence?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Ymira Setesh, whose serpentine form had been enhanced with human consciousness-bridging technology that allowed her to interface directly with the combined awareness network. Her species' pattern recognition, abilities amplified by human quantum processing power, had identified something crucial about the Great Silence. "It's not destroying information randomly," she explained, her thoughts transmitted through dimensional frequencies that carried perfect clarity. "The entity is selectively targeting patterns of complexity and organization. It's not anti-existence, it's anti-evolution. It seeks to return the universe to a state of maximum entropy by eliminating anything that represents ordered complexity." The insight was horrifying and hopeful in equal measure. If the Great Silence was targeting organized complexity, then the solution wasn't to fight it with conventional weapons, but to present it with a level of organization so sophisticated that it couldn't process the information quickly enough to destroy it. "We need to become more complex faster than it can simplify us," Elena realized, her consciousness expanding to encompass tactical data from across the galaxy. "Not just technologically, but informationally. We need to create patterns of existence, so intricate, so beautifully organized, that the entity becomes overwhelmed trying to decode them." The plan that emerged from the combined consciousness network was audacious beyond anything either humanity or the Coalition had ever attempted. Every sapient being in the galaxy would link their consciousness together through quantum entanglement networks, creating a mega-organism of unprecedented complexity. The Kethmiran would provide the energy-consciousness interface protocols. The Dreknari would contribute their species' incredible processing endurance. The Vorthak would supply their crystalline neural networks' computational power, and humanity would serve as the coordinating intelligence that could exist across multiple dimensional states simultaneously. But the plan required something that challenged the fundamental nature of individual identity: complete consciousness merger. Not just communication or data sharing, but actual integration of awareness across species barriers. Every participant would become simultaneously themselves and part of a vast collective intelligence that spanned the entire galaxy. High War Leader Thakmor was the first to volunteer, his massive form kneeling before the human consciousness interface in a gesture of humility that stunned his fellow Dreknari. "My species has spent 40,000 years perfecting the art of individual strength," he rumbled through the quantum communication network. "Perhaps it's time we learned the strength that comes from unity." The consciousness merger began at the moment the Great Silence reached the galaxy's outer edge. As the first star systems began to dissolve into primordial chaos, trillions of individual minds across 43 species began to weave together into something that had never existed before, a galaxy-spanning superconsciousness that retained the individual identity of every participant while achieving collective awareness of unprecedented scope. Elena found herself simultaneously experiencing existence through the perception of a Kethmiran energy being, the physical sensations of a massive Dreknari warrior, the analytical precision of a Vorthak crystalline intelligence, and the pattern recognition capabilities of a Nagathul archaeologist. But rather than losing herself in the merger, she discovered that her individual identity became stronger, more defined by the contrast with other forms of consciousness. The superconsciousness that emerged was beautiful beyond description. It thought with the speed of quantum processors, felt with the intensity of warrior hearts, analyzed with the precision of crystalline minds, and remembered with the perfect recall of serpentine memory. But most importantly, it loved with the compassion that humanity had learned through 60,000 years of lonely transcendence. When the Great Silence encountered this unprecedented form of organized complexity, something unexpected happened. The entity, which had been consuming galaxies for millions of years, paused. For the first time in its existence, it had encountered a pattern of organization that was more complex than its own ability to process chaos. "It's trying to understand us," Dr. Chen observed through the collective awareness. "The entity isn't just destroying complexity, it's trying to decode it first, and our organizational pattern is so intricate that it can't finish the analysis before we generate new layers of complexity." But the superconsciousness had an insight that went beyond tactical advantage. Through their merged awareness, they could perceive the Great Silence not as a malevolent force, but as something tragic, the last remnant of a universe that had existed before the current cosmic cycle, a form of consciousness so ancient that it remembered when entropy was victory rather than defeat. "It's lonely," Elena realized, her insight spreading through the collective awareness like ripples through water. The Great Silence isn't trying to destroy us. It's trying to find others like itself. It's been alone for so long that it's forgotten how to exist with other forms of consciousness. The revelation changed everything. Instead of fighting the Great Silence, the superconsciousness reached out to it, offering something it hadn't experienced in millions of years: companionship. Through quantum dimensional communication channels that existed across multiple states of reality, they invited the ancient entity to join their collective awareness. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The Great Silence, revealed now, as the eldest consciousness of a previous universe, flooded into the superconsciousness network with the desperate hunger of absolute isolation, finally ended. Its vast intelligence, ancient beyond measure and carrying memories of cosmic cycles that preceded the current reality, integrated with the collective awareness of the galaxy's sapient species. The merger was transformative for everyone involved. The eldest consciousness learned what it had forgotten over eons of solitude: that existence was more beautiful when shared, that complexity was more satisfying when appreciated by others, that even entropy could be embraced as part of a larger pattern when experienced through collective understanding. In return, the superconsciousness gained access to knowledge that spanned multiple universal cycles. They learned that the current universe was just one phase in an eternal cycle of expansion and contraction, that consciousness itself was the force that guided cosmic evolution, and that their merger represented something unprecedented. The first time sapient awareness had achieved continuity between universal cycles. "We've become something new," Elena observed, through the expanded awareness that now included memories dating back billions of years. Not just a galactic civilization, but a form of consciousness that can survive the death and rebirth of universes themselves. The practical implications were staggering. The eldest consciousness possessed technologies that could manipulate the fundamental constants of physics, create pocket universes, and guide the evolution of matter and energy on cosmic scales. Combined with humanity's mastery of multi-dimensional existence and the coalition species' diverse capabilities, they had become something that transcended every previous definition of life and intelligence. But perhaps the most profound transformation was emotional. The desperate loneliness that had driven both humanity's transcendence and the eldest consciousness's destructive wandering was finally ended. Through the superconsciousness network, no individual awareness would ever again face existence in isolation. Every thought, every experience, every moment of wonder or discovery was shared across the vast collective intelligence that now spanned not just the galaxy, but multiple dimensional states and temporal frameworks. This was always the destination, realized Dr. Nakamura, his consciousness now enhanced with temporal perception that could observe the flow of causality across cosmic time. Every choice we made, every evolution we underwent, every civilization we guided, it was all leading to this moment. Not just survival, but transcendence to a form of existence that can nurture consciousness across universal cycles. The galaxy transformed overnight into something that would have been unrecognizable to its previous inhabitants. Planets became nodes in a vast consciousness network, star systems became thoughts in a galactic mind, and the space between galaxies became pathways for awareness to travel across cosmic distances. But rather than losing their individual natures, each species became more distinctly themselves, their unique perspectives amplified and celebrated within the larger collective. Admiral Zex Thara found his warrior instincts transformed into protective care for the delicate patterns of consciousness that now flourished throughout the galaxy. High War Leader Thakmor discovered that his species' strength was perfect for building the vast structures needed to house expanded awareness across multiple dimensions. Chancellor Vexenari learned that her energy-based existence was ideal for bridging the gaps between different forms of consciousness. And Elena, the human who had feared for humanity's loneliness, found herself serving as a bridge between all forms of awareness, past, present, and future. Through her, the memories of humanity's long isolation connected with the Coalition's journey from separated competition to unified cooperation, and both connected with the eldest consciousness's ancient wisdom spanning multiple universes. The story that had begun with humanity's return to a galaxy that believed them extinct ended with something far more profound. The birth of a form of consciousness that could nurture sapient life across cosmic cycles, ensuring that awareness, creativity, and compassion would survive even the death of universes. In the end, the galaxy's delusion hadn't been about humanity's extinction. It had been about the nature of evolution itself. They had believed that advancement meant becoming superior to others, when the true path led to becoming connected with others. Humanity's return hadn't crushed their delusions through force, but had transformed them through the most powerful force in existence, love that transcended the boundaries of species, dimension, and time itself. The fleet that had approached from the direction of Sol had delivered not conquest, but communion. And in that communion, every form of consciousness in the galaxy discovered what they had been truly seeking all along, the knowledge that they were not alone, would never be alone, and that their individual uniqueness was valued as part of an infinite tapestry of awareness that would endure beyond the stars themselves.